We already knew that the way Valve operates is completely different to the way every other gaming company operates, but we also just learned that the way Valve makes money is also completely different from the way all these other gaming companies make money. Think about it. What do all these gaming companies want in the first place? Recurring revenue. It's the siren song of big gaming. Every major player has decided that the sole sustainable way to stay afloat is to keep you on their teat. Some choose subscriptions, Xbox Game Pass, PlayStation Plus, and EA Play. Even companies you don't think of as gaming giants, Netflix and Amazon, they are scrambling to get their piece of the subscription gaming pie too. Or, of course, there's the endless drip feed of microtransactions in every live service game from Call of Duty to Marvel Rivals. Unlike the one-time purchase of a game, microtransactions are designed for repeated and often impulsive small-scale purchases. But whatever poison they pick, the end goal of big gaming is the same: to make you a continuous source of their revenue. But we also just found out that Valve is one of the richest companies in the world, at least when measured by employee, even richer than Netflix and Apple, and they went in a completely different direction than the rest of the industry. Or did they? That's what we're going to explore today. We're going to talk about what makes Valve so much money, how rich they truly are, and we're going to uncover the surprising truth about how their unique approach, fundamentally different from the rest of the industry, has quietly built them an empire. So let's get into it. Steam is by far Valve's biggest moneymaker, but it's unlike any other digital store we've seen, and that has a lot to do with us. We are the reason Valve is so rich, because we are willing to build a backlog even more so than players on other platforms, at least according to one market analyst, Chris Zakowski, in his recent blog post that is now making the rounds. I've read through this post a few times, and personally, I think he nails it. He says that Steam's remarkable success, especially for indie developers, stems from super die-hard hobbyists. In his post, Zukowski states that basically hobbyists buy stuff not because they actually want to consume it, but because they are collecting it. He goes on to cite data that the median Steam player has more than half of their collection unplayed. He likens this phenomenon to sundoku, which is a Japanese term that refers to the act of buying books and letting them pile up knowing that you're not going to have the time to read them. He goes on to say that this behavior is consistent across various hobbies like Lego and Warhammer. Now, this phenomenon makes so much sense to me, and it's fascinating to consider that Valve strategically amplifies it, even more so with the Steam Deck. For decades, PC gamers have had the luxury of buying games with the confidence that they could play them someday, even years down the line, because they could always upgrade their PC and play that library. The Steam Deck has really supercharged this mentality, right? Now that massive backlog isn't just for someday at your desk, it's for someday anywhere. It's a powerful psychological pull, making even more games feel like viable purchases, directly fueling our collection habit. And I think this whole backlog strategy is entirely by design on Valve's part, and it's not just Steam helping indies, but also the other way around. By my recollection, people didn't want, but instead just tolerated Steam, at least for a long time. Back in the early 2000s, PC gaming was seen as plagued with piracy, and yet still, PC gamers were simultaneously unwilling to part with their physical copies. The fact that Half-Life 2 required a Steam login to play was seen as a betrayal. But Valve proved that they were willing to make this worth our while. Steam ushered in convenience that we hadn't seen before in gaming, but it shouldn't be understated that over the coming years, Steam also brought two new things with it: amazing holiday sales that actually offered even better discounts than today's Steam sales, and indie games that at the time you really couldn't find on other platforms. Once upon a time, Steam sales offered up entire catalogs at deep discounts, so you could buy like every Square Enix game on Steam for under $100 total. And they would have flash sales that only lasted a few hours, but offered the deepest discounts of all. Given the nature of PC gaming, especially in contrast to console gaming, Steam players felt confident that they could build up their huge catalog and have time to play these games someday. Like I said, you can upgrade your PC years down the line and your games are still going to be playable, at least for the most part. Although the old Steam sales were better overall, the advent of Steam key sites like Indie Gala, Green Man Gaming, and others created an enhanced FOMO culture around getting the best possible bargain for games. Savvy consumers were using deal trackers like therein by comparing not only to previous sales, but comparing to all previous sales on all PC marketplaces, and even tracking whether or not a game has been in a bundle. Historical low became a new, easy metric to know that you were in fact getting a good deal. At the same time that Steam sales were blowing up, Xbox was spearheading the indie game movement with XBLA's Summer of Arcade events. But Xbox was hampered by its stringent certification process, high patching costs, and a much more curated approach to publishing. This allowed Steam to rapidly gain ground and eventually overshadow XBLA as the primary destination for groundbreaking indies. 2010 to 2012 represented a huge growth period. There was suddenly a surge of innovative indie titles that you could primarily or only find on Steam. The Binding of Isaac was a title developed on Flash, and so it couldn't be ported to consoles for a long time. Space Chem was a programming puzzle game that didn't make much sense without a mouse or touch interface. Terraria melded Minecraft with pixel art and became one of the best-selling indies ever. Dear Esther was pivotal in what we today call walking simulators, and even a game like Hotline Miami was exclusive to PC for about 8 months. This reputation for being home to indies became amplified with the advent of Steam Greenlight and eventually a completely open game submission process. Together, a seemingly endless catalog of games combined with a FOMO culture around sales drove us hobbyists to buy up games that it turns out we wouldn't have time to play. And a number of games released to Steam each year compounded, which only exacerbated the trend. This ultimately cemented Steam's dominance as the primary collecting platform, and it fueled ever-growing backlogs that would become Valve's unique revenue stream. It's funny too, because Valve making money from me or you building a backlog kind of spits in the face of what nearly every other major player is desperately chasing: the subscription. And there's a reason subscriptions are so attractive to these major players. Research shows that loss aversion, decision fatigue, and the default effect all play a key role in convincing the human brain that staying subscribed is just the easier choice when compared to canceling your subscription. Loss aversion says that humans are generally more motivated to avoid a loss than to acquire an equivalent gain, and this cognitive bias has been exploited by marketing departments for decades. Likewise, humans are constantly bombarded with decisions they have to make throughout the day, and decision fatigue dictates that navigating a cancellation process adds to a mental burden, and so it's easier to just not. And then there's the default effect. Subscriptions are typically set to auto-renew, and customers have to manually opt out if they want to cancel. Here, studies show that subscribers are more likely to renew if the subscription is automatically set to do so. Kind of obvious, right? Now, there is a lot of nuance that I'm leaving out of these high-level descriptions of different cognitive biases. For example, auto-renew doesn't seem to benefit the corporation in the long term, but these corporations do seem more interested in the short term, so maybe that's the explanation there. Nonetheless, subscriptions aren't a magic pill to making money either. You have to convince the customer to subscribe in the first place. And despite those cognitive biases, people will eventually unsubscribe if you're not offering them something new. These subscriptions face another hurdle too. They're competing with the entire attention economy. Netflix's competition isn't just Disney and HBO Max, it's also TikTok and YouTube. Even just the act of doom scrolling takes time that could be spent watching the latest episodes of your favorite show. And mind you, there's only so many hours in a day, days in a week, and weeks in a year. Content is being released so frequently that it's impossible to watch every show you want to watch and play every game you want to play. This could present a problem for Game Pass, which relies on you actually spending time playing video games to justify the monthly cost. Valve ends up sidestepping this entirely. Here's a quote from the Chris Zukowski piece about this very subject. It says, "Valve cracked a problem that Netflix was struggling with. How do you sell to people who have so much entertainment at their fingertips that they don't have enough hours in a day to play and watch it all? Valve basically added infinite hours to a gamer's day. It's a theoretical future day where gamers might someday spend hours playing your game, but let's be honest, won't." This is precisely why Valve doesn't have to worry about subscriptions. They don't have to try to get you to pay every month. They know that if they provide a quality service and enough convenience, you're going to come back to grow your catalog of games that you think you're going to play someday. I see this as a sort of quiet confidence from Valve. It's like they're saying, we don't need you to commit to paying a monthly fee. We know you're going to come back for more. That confidence illustrates a contrast to other gaming corporations who scramble for money feels like trickery more often than not. Consider AAA companies that offer 3 days advance access to a new release. It doesn't add anything of real value, it's just a quick way to monetize your impatience. Full-price AAA games that launch in what feel like an unfinished state just represent a breach of trust with the customer. We're willing to forgive bugs, but past a certain point, you're asking us to buy the promise of a game that'll be good eventually. Gaming corps are constantly pushing for more, often at the expense of value or trust. And here comes Valve saying, if you want more, feel free. If not, that's cool. Now, that's not to say it's all good. At the top of the video, I drew a contrast from the backlog model to subscriptions and to microtransactions. I also said that microtransactions are designed for repeated and often impulsive small-scale purchases. Plot twist, when I think about my backlog purchases, they too feel a lot like a bunch of impulsive small-scale purchases. I've had times where I am more responsible or less responsible, but when I look at my purchases more historically, they're not exactly rational. I buy games because they're on sale and I expect to play them later this year, or maybe just because it's made by a developer that I want to support. And then there are certainly times where I bought games just because I got 10 titles for $10, and I thought, certainly there's going to be something in here that's going to delightfully surprise me. The hidden gem lottery is real. And I know people have bought games just to make their library a little bigger, and I understand that too. Listen, I've never been one for cosmetic microtransactions. I'm here to play the damn game, not dress up my character. But why are we buying all these games we're not going to play if not to dress up our digital library? It turns out this seemingly irrational behavior isn't just us, it's baked into Valve's success. Chris Zukowski, that market analyst I mentioned earlier, he put it bluntly. He said, if Steam shoppers were rational and only bought games they were going to play, we would sell a lot fewer games. Half this industry would be gone. Irrational though it may be, it's also kind of wholesome in a way. Like I said, sometimes we just want to be delightfully surprised by a hidden gem, and if we get that hit of dopamine, we're going to recommend that game to a friend, and maybe we'll follow the game developer so we can find out when they make a next game. I don't know about you, but I love that feeling of finding a studio that makes amazing games that not a lot of people are talking about. Case in point, my current obsession is Strange Scaffold, who focus on making really good AA games really quickly. So far, they're nailing it, and in different genres too. They have a TMNT Tactics game that is a banger. They have a first-person shooter called I Am Your Beast that's designed with speedrunning in mind and is heavily focused on beating your own and your friends' best times. And then they have El Paso Elsewhere, which plays like Max Payne, but with supernatural neo-noir elements that have you battling vampires. The point is, they're awesome. Go buy their games. I made this entire video just to convince you to buy their games, so just do it already. Nonetheless, that aside, I think we now have to address the elephant in the room. The Steam Deck? This entire backlog phenomenon seems deeply tied to the Steam Deck and really Valve's entire hardware strategy, including rumors about them working on a Steam console and Steam VR headset, and not in a nefarious way, just in a, oh, that makes sense kind of way. You know what I mean? Valve created the Steam Deck in part because there were employees that felt like, wouldn't it be cool if I could play my library on the go? And of course they felt that way. They're a bunch of busy grown-ups, possibly fathers and mothers like many of us are. So they didn't want to just play their games when tied to a desk. They wanted to play on a handheld to give themselves more freedom and really more time to play their back catalog of games. Steam Deck literally gives you back more time in the day to play games, which strengthens the notion that you'll have time someday to play your pile of shame, the ever-growing list of games that you own but haven't played. And this kind of works in a symbolic way too. The Steam Deck shows that Valve is going to support your library of games even when other gaming companies don't. SteamOS says you can rely on Valve even when you can't rely on Windows. Proton says you can rely on Valve to make improvements to compatibility, even if you can't necessarily rely on the game devs to do so. Trackpads, capacitive sticks, gyro, back buttons, and Steam input as a whole say that you can rely on Valve to make great accessible controls, even when you can't rely on, say, X input. And the Steam Deck as a piece of kit, especially debuting when it did, showed that you can rely on Valve for an affordable piece of gaming hardware, even when the likes of Nvidia are gouging you because AI is what is currently catching the interest of shareholders. I'm not saying that Valve is actually looking out for your best interest. It just seems to be one of the few companies that acknowledges that your interests and their interests are aligned. Public companies often bend to the will of shareholders, but with Valve, you, the purveyor of digital games, are the true and only customer. We've talked about how this makes Valve a boatload of money, but how much money is it truly? Well, it was recently revealed that Valve's profit per employee from Steam commissions alone is estimated to be $3.5 million per employee, at least as of 2021. This comes from leaked documents in a court case between Valve and Wolfire Games. This amount is significantly higher than the likes of Facebook and Apple, whose numbers are $780,000 and $476,000 per employee, respectively. The leaked document has since been pulled offline, and broadly it warrants a grain of salt, but it reportedly shows that Steam's commission revenue grew from around $100 million in 2009 to $2 billion in 2021, including an operating profit of about $1.2 billion from Steam alone. With just 336 Valve employees at the time, that brings the profit per head calculation to $3.5 million. Naturally, this calculation has two sides to it, the profit and the number of employees. It's probably safe to say that viewers of this channel are broadly well-versed in the business of Valve, and we know that Valve operates very lean. Often this is for the better, but at times you can see the flip side of this, as Valve employees are often pulled in different directions, and as a result, it often feels like Valve moves really slowly, including when it comes to SteamOS and especially when it comes to game development. This is probably where my strongest criticisms of Valve stem from, especially in scenarios where it gives them plausible deniability to otherwise questionable behavior. Take, for example, the recent criticism from a Bellular News video. This video gives two examples where companies that make a lot of money are breaking Steam's terms of service and are not being punished by Valve. These scenarios make it reasonable to ask the question, are they not getting punished because they're receiving preferential treatment, as Bellular News is alluding to, or is this just Valve not getting around to it because they've got so much going on and so few employees? Either way, these actions could jeopardize some of the trust that Valve has built up with us. One of the scenarios that Bellular points out is billion-dollar company Nexon hosting what they called a review event where they essentially bribed users to leave Steam reviews, an act that is strictly forbidden by Steam's terms of service, but had so far gone unpunished. Gone unchecked, this could cause players to lose trust in Steam user reviews the way that we've lost trust in Amazon reviews or mobile app store reviews. Now, I don't think Valve will ever let that happen since it undermines the backlog model after all, but no company is perfect, and this just shows that Valve's lean, decentralized structure leads to both unique drawbacks as well as unique benefits. Certainly Valve has room for improvement, but it's safe to say that I prefer Valve's operating philosophy over those of their competitors. Would we have the Steam Deck without Valve's decentralized structure leading employees to try to solve the personal problem of playing their extensive backlog away from their desk? Would Valve still be content with us just building our backlogs and not subscribing monthly if their interests were divided between customers and shareholders, similar to typical AAA gaming companies? Obviously, Valve's model is working for them, but it's working for me too. Will I ever have time to play my ridiculous backlog? No. But do I regret all of those purchases? Not yet. What about you?